I walk in here, I'm like, this is a total loss.
The whole roof's coming off.
I mean, there isn't a square inch that wasn't impacted by this.
You got to go as far as the damage takes you.
I want to know what they go through, and that's Man of Interest. I'm really excited to be here today. I am here with Jeff Richards, who is a public insurance adjuster. Jeff and I have actually known each other for several years. We first crossed paths when I'm doing my day job running a property management company, and we've experienced losses. More specifically, our clients may have experienced losses in their properties, and I was blessed enough to be connected with Jeff, who really has educated me on what a public insurance adjuster does, the critical role they play, and how much value they can bring when they know what they're doing. We're standing here today inside of clearly a really bad loss. As I understand it, Jeff, there was a fire that started here in the kitchen. It's obviously long since been put out. The fire department did their job. But why don't you just take us through kind of your initial impressions, if you will, of the scene here. And maybe even before that, if you can maybe talk to the audience who doesn't know what a public insurance adjuster does, hasn't been through a loss, and what role you would play if they were ever to have to go through something tragic like this.
Sure. Well, it was great meeting you so many years ago, I have to say, and it's been great to work with you.
Feeling likewise.
A public adjuster represents homeowners and business owners at the time and after they suffer a loss like this. This is a devastating thing for any family to go through. To think that they can manage their way through the process themselves, they may not be wrong, but they don't have time to do it, and they don't have the skills to deliver a product to fairly demonstrate the value of their claim. And unless they begin that process right away, before too long, things are going to start to disappear and change, and then you're going to never have the chance to capture that value. So as public adjusters, we represent and advocate for the policyholder.
Okay.
And we work with them collaboratively to capture the value and to deliver that to their insurance company as our proof of loss, the value of what we lost due to this terrible catastrophic event.
So I want to say this, Jeff, because before I met you all those years ago, right, and you really educated me truly on the critical role that you play at this critical time in somebody's life, right? My experience was, I have a loss. Thank God I've never had to experience something like this, but I've had a loss. I'm going to call up my insurance company. I'm going to make a claim, and I would just have expected them to send out their insurance adjuster, right? And I think everybody can relate to this as far as how it relates to maybe a loss with a car or some other minor thing like this. I didn't understand, first of all, that your role even existed, B, how critical it is at a time of need like this, and how it can truly make the difference between a positive outcome and a horrible experience.
You're exactly right.
And maybe you can kind of explain why, in cases like this, really a policyholder who's experienced a loss like this should not be relying on their insurance company and the insurance adjuster more specifically to take care of their needs.
We are inundated as consumers with messaging from insurance companies during the football games we watch, the comedy shows we watch, on your phone. You're going to see all these cute ads from insurance companies, which builds some level of trust. People think that, well, I've paid my homeowner's insurance or my auto insurance every year. Now I really need them. They'll be there for me.
Of course, all that advertising.
Well, they will be there for you, but they have an agenda, and their interests are no longer aligned with yours now that you've suffered a loss, because they're on the hook now to pay.
And the audience may not know this, Jeff, but you actually used to be on the other side of the table, correct?
That's right.
You used to work for the big bad insurance company.
That's right.
Right? So you've seen it from the other side. Maybe you can talk to the audience a little bit about that experience and how it really informed your ability now to deliver the most value for a client in a time of loss, because you understand the insurance companies in a way that somebody that's never worked on that other side of the table would not.
Right. Well, I'm glad to say that I started my insurance claim adjusting career in 1986. That's a long time ago.
You're dating yourself.
Back then, the industry was really a lot different.
Different better or different worse?
Better for the policyholder.
Okay.
We went through training courses for, I think, 6 weeks to learn about building structures.
As an adjuster.
As an adjuster.
Right.
And then another 6 weeks learning about the policy coverages. Nowadays, it's sad to say, but insurance companies have taken a different tact entirely, and they're more interested in a process that delays and in some cases denies claims.
Would it be fair to say, Jeff, based on all of your interactions with insurance adjusters, they used to be trained? I thought what you were going to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is again to reinforce the message to homeowners, policyholders out there. The insurance adjusters of today aren't the same caliber as the insurance adjusters of yesterday.
It's a weak bench.
It's a weak pen. Don't put too fine of a point on it. Take us from the top, kind of step 1, step 2, step 3, of how you approach a claim like this.
As we drive up to the property, we're making observations about how severe the fire was. We knew coming in that the home was no longer inhabitable. So our first step is to take observations on the outside of the building, walk around the entire house.
Okay.
We've already collected the data, so we have a good idea of what we're walking into.
Okay.
And we have a perspective on the outside of the building.
How do you approach this? I mean, I immediately was drawn to the fact that, well, obviously when you got here, there may or may not have been tarps on there, but that right away is sending like, hey, we had penetration through the roof, right, so we probably have water, so on and so forth. But when you approach the crime scene, as it were, where are you starting your data gathering?
So today we're here to assess the loss to the building, to the structure of the building.
Okay.
And we always start on the outside. We'll take a walk around the building.
No matter what?
No matter what.
Okay.
We know that there was a fire in the kitchen.
Okay.
And that it burned a big portion of the exterior wall and into the attic space.
Okay.
And that the roof took some heavy damage.
Okay.
That's really all we know right now as we arrive. So we'll start and we'll walk around the outside. We'll make our observations. We'll make some notes of anything out of the ordinary or that we see.
Okay.
We've already requested what we call a ridgetop report. It's a corporation that takes satellite images of buildings. And we already have collected the dimensions of the roof and the footprint of the structure.
Okay.
We'll incorporate the data that we gather from that source into the Matterport data that we're going to collect today on the inside of the building.
Okay.
And using that information, we're going to assemble an estimate to reconstruct this property to its pre-loss condition.
So let me back up a step. When you get engaged, it's typically what? A phone call from the homeowner, whoever actually is,
usually
owns the property itself.
Usually a good referral source.
What data are you able to normally collect over the phone from the person contacting you? Like, how much are you able to actually extract at that point?
Very little.
Okay.
Other than, and really, I don't really want to distract them with that sort of information.
Right.
I want to make sure that, is everyone okay?
Yep.
Do you have a place to live?
Right.
That's really, in a loss like this that has displaced you and your family.
Right.
That's really what you should be directing your initial energies to.
Approaching the loss, kind of take us through what your next steps would be.
So we see the roof is destroyed. There's structural damage over that, what looks like a patio door area. That whole roof is in question to me, structurally.
Okay.
And obviously the exterior wall. The pitch of the roof, we're gonna make note of. We're looking next at the cornice elements, where the gutter is hung, to make sure we identify the materials that comprise the fascia and the soffit. In this case, there's a wood fascia wrapped with aluminum
siding.
trim.
Yep.
And then on the underside is a vinyl soffit. We take the dimensions of those. We see here there's some soffit vents. We'll get a quantity and a count of those. Exterior light fixtures, these planter hangers, and of course the shutters. I don't know what you call that. It's underneath the windowsill planter. And then over here at grade, you see the masonry pavers, which are destroyed.
Right.
The depth of the burn and the heat will discolor those.
Yep.
So we'll be taking the measurement of this entire patio area, and this will be claimed for replacement.
If an insurance adjuster came out here and you weren't here, is it fair to say that, without getting too into this, they may not be as thorough and comprehensive?
Exactly.
And rather than taking the total dimension, they might be like, well, just these are kind of burned or charred. We're going to replace that. The rest of this is salvageable.
That's exactly what you're going to get.
Okay.
Maybe not in this specific circumstance, but routinely, they want to put a patch on it.
Right. They're not looking for thorough restoration. They're looking
The
for...
thing with a patch is you're going to see the patch.
Sure.
In your house.
Sure.
Every time you walk by it. Most times a patch is not restoring you properly. After we collect that information, we're going to be heading inside, and Brennan's going to be taking the measurements of the room using the Matterport. We're going to be making observations about dimensions of things and what sort of materials comprise the home.
Is there any other information that you would need to gather in this particular case kind of at first attempt, or are we ready to go inside?
Well, we're going to spend some time measuring this.
Okay.
Measuring this up and collecting all the specific information that we need.
Great.
Now, let me also comment on the outdoor furniture that's here and all the personal property that you see strewn about. Some of it came from the inside, some of it's outside and got burned and damaged.
Yep.
The personal property losses in the home, they're so much higher than people think.
Right.
We own a lot of things here in America.
Yeah.
And we've had a team of people already in here. You'll see evidence of that as we go through. They've made an inventory of every item in every room, and that is the other element of the loss.
So again, setting that table.
Setting that table. And then we enter
Step number 2. Coming inside.
Come into the building and start getting dirty.
Okay.
And dig around and just identify how the building was put together. What's the dimensions of the lumber? What kind of insulation systems? The heating systems? Domestic water? How do they heat their home? Is there oil tanks that we have to be
So you're cataloging as much as you can, building construction, infrastructure, everything from wiring to heating to plumbing and everything else in between.
Everything in between. We're interested to know what happened.
Can we just take a moment to recognize how devastating this is? I mean, there isn't a square inch of this house that wasn't impacted by this.
You're exactly right.
I mean, not a square inch.
So the phrase total loss comes up.
Yeah.
And it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Right.
But, you might hear the phrase total loss when you come into a loss like this. It's a severe loss.
I mean, you've seen thousands of these over your years, Jeff. That being said, does it ever get normalized?
I'm afraid so.
Okay. You get, just over time you become a little desensitized
I'm afraid so.
to the process.
But I'm careful when I'm dealing with the homeowners and their family. You can't lose sight of the severity of it.
Understood.
And I never do. So here we're interested to know what happened because it will help us understand, where to look for damage.
Right.
We're also interested to know in how the house was put together. The fire started somewhere here in the kitchen. I'm told it was the ceiling fan, which on the other side of the island, you'll get a view of it.
The ceiling fan caught fire? Was it an electrical short like that? We don't know.
I don't know.
I know you're not the fire inspector.
I don't know for certain, but that's what we heard through the grapevine, so to speak. From the sake of the handling of this individual claim, it's not terribly important for us.
No,
we want to make sure that the homeowner shares that information, whatever they do know about the cause of the fire with the company, because the companies do have the right to try to find out if there was a manufacturer's defect in something there.
Right, they're really looking for where they could probably deflect some of the costs potentially and recover some of their money. Exactly. I get it, but for your purposes, it's like you need to assess what really is the loss value here, and that's a seriously involved process, obviously.
It is. So
how do you start?
We'll be gathering the dimensions of the room.
Okay.
And we're going to just make observations today about how extensive the structural damage is, because you got to go as far as the damage takes you.
You got to follow it.
So, and wherever there's not any structural damage, you can be assured that smoke has filled that space.
Yeah, they can't pick this up on camera, but I can tell you the air is stifling with the smell of smoke and soot, and I mean, you feel like you're standing inside of a smoggy, wet campfire that's just been put out. I mean, it's thick in the air. And I have to imagine it's penetrated every single surface around here.
Every surface and every cavity.
Yeah.
The wall cavities, the ceiling cavities, the smoke gets pressurized and starts moving all the way through.
Didn't even think about that.
And then it settles out of the air and just goes everywhere.
Let's just take a step back. Obviously, there was a major fire here. It might have started small, as they all do, but it ended up, becoming a major blaze. First order of business, fire department gets here, they're just pouring water into the scene, right? And so in and of itself, while the water is necessary, that of course does its own damage. I mean, people may not be able to realize it, but this insulation, which once upon a time used to be in the ceiling, is now on the floor, is a giant soggy sponge. And it is everywhere like that.
It is.
So the water itself, even beyond the fire, is a damaging effect. Completely unavoidable, need to do it, but...
So on to that point, the water that's been introduced to this property is now trapped in this property. The temperatures are such that, we don't see a lot of effect of mold growth right now. But I assure you, as things warm up, mold is going to start to show up on anything that provides a food source.
And there's a lot of that there. Any organic surface essentially is a food source for mold, right?
Exactly.
So even if it wasn't touched by flame, even if it wasn't necessarily, damaged badly by smoke, if there's moisture, which there is, I mean, you can feel it, the humidity level in here, it's going to probably touched by mold.
Exactly. So we're in the left rear corner bedroom, and we can see here when we look up in the attic space through the ceiling that's been removed, that there's fire damage
all
to the
throughout.
Rafters.
Oh, you can see
and
it.
to
It's
the
charred black.
plywood sheathing.
Yep.
And we're about 16 feet away from the patio doorway area. So there's two sections of this home. We're now into the second section of the roof.
Wow.
So, as you look at the damage to the roof from the backside, there's an initial impression that it's just one half of the roof system that might have structural damage. But as I'm looking over here, I'm seeing
it's clearly not the case.
It's likely. I'm already thinking that the whole roof's coming off. Yeah. The span between rafters is also important in terms of us calculating the proper value and the materials involved.
Sure.
And it also may lead to
the spacing on center of those rafters for the roof. Okay.
And that could potentially lead to a deficiency that's identified by current building codes.
Right.
That may not satisfy the current building codes.
Which means they would need to build it to code, which would be more expensive than simply replacing what's there.
Correct.
Okay.
And it might become very important to the homeowner that we recognize that early on.
100%.
How you manage your way through the claim is critically important.
Okay.
You want to capture code dollars as you go, if you will.
This is, again, getting back to setting the table as much as you can and then adding to the table as you go.
Exactly.
I have to ask, because you mentioned the words total loss out there. And, as a novice to this, never having done it before like this, you guys do this all the time. I walk in here, I'm like, this is a total loss. The only analogy, though, that I have is car accidents. I've gotten into a car accident before. And while the damage may not look too bad, it isn't until they bring it to the body shop and they start tearing things apart that they really begin to understand what the actual cost to repair is. And more, it becomes commonplace that what you thought was a fender bender ends up in a total loss of the vehicle. Is that like the same situation with house losses?
It is.
I'm trying to draw some analogy that somebody watching this may be able to relate to, because I pray people watching this haven't been through this.
It is not uncommon for us to see damage in a week that we didn't see today.
Of course.
It does happen. And the homeowner is always entitled to present those supplemental claims.
Okay.
Because you can't expect to capture everything at once, and the insurance carriers know this. It does raise the import of capturing as much as you can as soon as you can.
Again, building that case.
Exactly.
Really just going in loaded for bear to make sure they understand that you've got your ducks in a row. All right, I'll go first.
Watch your step.
The purpose of the Matterport, obviously, is to capture, well, for those people that don't know, maybe you could describe the Matterport, what it does, and how you guys utilize it as a tool in a claim situation.
Take it away, Bren.
It is a three-dimensional, I don't really know what to call it, like an image capture device. And I like it because it captures the loss as it was when I was there. I can write an entire estimate in most cases from just the images picked up on this. It saves time. It's a great tool for me, and the insurance company always appreciates when I have basically a virtual tour of the home. You don't have to come back as often. It's a great tool. It helps everyone.
Is it detailed enough, and I think you answered this, Brendan, but it sounds like it is. It's detailed enough that if used properly, which you obviously know how to do, you can go back to the office, the comfort of your office, and use the images captured by this to really tear apart the scene, as it were, and build a scope of what work is going to need to be done. And to Jeff's point, obviously, you're only as good as what you can see, you know, and you may
point, I mean, details, tiny details.
Yeah.
Easier. I mean, we take supplemental photos with
Sure.
phones, measuring, the exact width of casing. Although you can measure with the Matterport, we like to, be a little bit more detailed than that.
What we do, Justin, is we take photographs of the tape measure set up against the casings,
so you can get dimensions.
the baseboards,
Chair rails.
the
Okay.
crown moldings.
What would constitute a total
So
loss?
this crown molding,
Yeah.
it's not wood. This is a PVC product. Again, it's a comparable value,
Right.
but sometimes these are a lot more than wooden crowns. So
Right.
just one of those small details that we will pick up in our experience.
Is it a matter of math to determine total loss? Like, when do you kind of arrive at, if that were to be the case?
That's kind of a rabbit hole. What we're after here is to capture the full value of this loss.
Okay.
Depends on how much coverage they have in their policy.
Too many variables.
Depends what type of damage. Is it that code upgrade type of value that we're going to be going after, or is it what we see?
Okay.
In most cases, people have adequate insurance. We do find that that's not typically a problem.
Okay.
Typically.
But then it's a matter of maximizing the value of that coverage.
Exactly.
And that's really where your expertise and Brendan's expertise comes in, because, they may have adequate coverage, but as we've talked about a few times, it's fair to say in the most kind of terms that the insurance companies' motivations are not necessarily perfectly aligned with those of
That's fair to say.
the policyholders. Would you characterize that as a fair statement?
I'd say that's fair to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is aligning yourself with the needs and the motivations of that policyholder to truly realize the maximum value of that coverage.
Right.
Obviously, as necessary, you're not looking to, fleece the insurance company, but you want to get this homeowner back to their base case, which was what happened before this happened.
We're going to create a budget for them.
Right.
And we're going to drill down as far as if we can see it, we're going to include that in our claim.
Yeah.
And typically our claims have 30% more individual line items in them than any given insurance company's estimate. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 times as many line items, because they don't put the full thought into what goes into how do you build those kind of things. The tools that we all use, the estimating programs, are nothing more than tools, but if they're not used right, they're going to give you an illusion of a value that is not sufficient for what the homeowner's going to need and is entitled to and is paid for.
Yeah. When you approach a claim like this, what's your goal? What's the end game that you're hoping to leave here with?
My goal is to be thorough.
Okay.
And to be accurate.
Okay.
And the number's going to be what the number is, and we're going to fight for it and defend it. So our goal is to capture all the value that is here before us today.
So as much data gathering as possible, as thoroughly as possible, as accurately as possible, so that you can produce a result which is basically to hand to the insurance company and say, here's everything we've got, and here's what we're estimating the value at.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So talk to me for a second about your business, how you operate. Are you sole proprietor? I think it's fair to say that you don't normally drive down the highway and see billboards for public adjusters. And so how would somebody actually get referred to you? What's a referral source? How do people get in touch with you? How do they find out about you or find you in particular?
A lot of people don't know that public adjusters even exist.
I was one of those. True story. Years ago.
There is such an occupation.
Right.
People have a default expectation that the insurance company is going to do the right thing and come to their aid, and they sure do send someone out there for you. You're never quite sure who you're going to get. What you want to do is you want to interview public adjusters in your local area. Just Google public adjusters.
Okay.
Check them out. You want to begin early, but you do not want to make a decision on who you're going to be hiring and working with for the next year or two under duress. So take a breath, talk to your friends, talk to people that you trust, and find yourself a public adjuster.
Getting back to that referral source, you work with certain counterparties on a regular basis. Maybe you can talk to the audience a little bit about who some of those counterparties might be. I don't know, because I don't know your business, but it could be other B2Bs. Maybe it's a disaster recovery company, a remediation company. They might be somebody that you're crossing paths with, a demo company, for instance.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think through as somebody watching this, right? And they might know some people that would be in the network of a public insurance adjuster to try to help them find the right one. Because in fairness, in a loss like this, at a time when you're really kind of on your knees in terms of where you are in your life and the emotions that are dealing with, it's hard to rely on a Google rating to make such a massive decision as to who I'm going to be working shoulder to shoulder with for the next year or two to try to get my life put back together.
So I'm glad you asked that question. In a house fire situation, the public adjusters will find you. That's not how I do my business. There are public adjusters that they follow the fire truck and they listen to the scanners or Twitter, and if you have a fire, you'll be introduced to public adjusters. I don't get my business that way because I don't have the stomach for that. But there are board up companies, there are professional mitigation companies like ServiceMaster, ServPro, all sorts of franchised professional cleaning companies that specialize in restoration of these sorts of projects.
Okay.
They are a good resource for who's a good public adjuster, because the word's out. There's not a lot of us out there. If they take the time to talk to a few people, maybe a contractor of theirs has familiarity with public adjusters, but if they take half a day to make a few phone calls, hopefully they'll find me.
Well, let's help them out. I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I've worked with Jeff on a number of claims in properties that we manage and for clients. He does an amazing job. If somebody's in the greater Rhode Island and maybe southern Mass area, is that your area of coverage?
Yeah, JMR Adjustment Service handles the entire state of Rhode Island and eastern Massachusetts.
Eastern Massachusetts,
including Cape Cod. We're a boutique shop, but we have resources to call upon to help us in circumstances that require that.
That can extend your reach maybe a little bit.
Extend our reach a bit.
I'll say this, we're gonna absolutely include all of Jeff's contact information in the description below the video. You'll know how to reach him. You'll have access to their website, their phone number. And I can tell you right now, if you give him a call because you need his services, you will not be disappointed. Jeff, I just can't, thank you enough for this time.
Thank you, Justin, very
This has
much.
been fantastic.
I really appreciate you taking the time to see what I do.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing this with us and with the audience, I should say. It's been a pleasure.
Great, thank you.
Public insurance adjusters. Man, that's interesting.